This is the brand new SKIL CR5440B-10 if you want the kit as we see it here, which comes with a 4 amp hour battery. This is the PowerCore 20XP, means we have a brushless tool here running on their 20 volt platform, and it's their 7¼ inch circular saw. Now they also have a 2x20 volt rear handled circ saw, much different than this one. It's meant to be more of a framer saw where you're ripping 2x lumber all the time or ripping large sheets, and it does a great job, but this is a lot lighter weight, a lot more nimble, and again running on a single 20 volt battery. Now let's take a closer look at these features, but out of the gate let's look and see that it comes with a 5-year warranty. We don't usually do unboxing here, by the way, but I thought, you know what, we got to take it out of the box, so why not unbox it while we're filming? Start up the camera. Anyway, comes with a 5-year warranty, and there's some additional features that aren't just features on this saw, and we'll get to that in just one moment. So it looks like we get the SKIL 20 volt saw, a 24 tooth framing blade, 4 amp hour 20 volt battery, which by the way we've already charged to full capacity, and the power jump charger. If you're not aware of the new SKIL tools, you really ought to take a look, because the SKIL of old, and I don't mean the old, the real old SKIL tools had a lot of bite to them. They stick around for years, and many of your carpenters use them, woodworkers use them. And then as they got bought out by different companies, it kind of went by the wayside and kind of became a name that wasn't so synonymous with professionals. You owe it to yourself to take a look at the new SKIL again, because I'm telling you, they've done a lot to really ramp up, especially these newer tools. Done a great job, especially their brushless tools. Anyway, so we get the SKIL circular saw, we get the power jump charger, we get the battery, we even get a dust port here, so it looks like we can screw that into the port right here if we want to catch some of that debris. And as I was getting to with the power jump charger here, the company that makes SKIL Power Tools understands battery and charging technology, and the power jump charger will charge a battery, not the 4 amp hour, but a 2 amp hour battery up to 25% in 5 minutes. So probably, go in 10 minutes, take this to 25%. Regardless, they can do that safely by really pouring the power to it on the front side and know they're not going to harm the battery. Now, as it gets hotter and as it charges up a little more, it will slow down that pace. But the point is, if you're trying to finish a job and you need to throw a battery on the charge and get some juice out of it, within just a few minutes, get you a good Coca-Cola or some water, and by the time you finish that thing, your battery's good to go and ready to make those last few cuts or drive in those last few screws. Now let's take a look at this saw before we throw the blade on there. One thing I know, we get 5,300 RPM. Again, brushless motor. Looks like, yeah, so a cast aluminum shoe. I like that. So we're going to have lightweight, as well as it's going to be nice and sturdy. No flexing, or very limited flexing should be. And this little knob here is giving away another feature that I'm going to talk about. You have the knob here and the knob back here. It's going to give away one of those features I was talking about that may be on the saw but not part of the saw, or something like that. Maybe I'm just confusing everyone. So a couple of things here. Number one, we get a 56-degree bevel. The other thing is, it's kind of hard to see. We don't have any dual colors there. It's just black on black, so it's kind of hard to see those numbers. You got to make sure you kind of got a shine on one side and then you can see it. So I'd love to see some white numbers or silver numbers there. Either one would be great. But easy to adjust this bevel, flip it up, and it's going to lock out at 45 degrees. Now the cool thing is, if we want that 56 degrees, we've got a little tab here. We can flip that out of the way, and now we can go all the way to 56 degrees. So push that back down. It's going to lock out at 45, and flip it back up, and again, go all the way out to 56 degrees. Lock that down, and we're good to go. And then back here, this is going to adjust our cutting depth. Now see, this is great to see. So now we have some white numbers that we can easily see on that black background. There's a little line right here that corresponds with those, and then you can lock that down and you can cut up to 3x lumber. Very smooth with that loosened, so if we want to plunge, should enable us to plunge pretty easily. One thing I'm noticing here on the front of the shoe, we definitely have some marks here for 0 and 45 degrees. So we can see our 0 and 45 degree marks for our blade. On the rear of the saw, I'm not seeing anything, so when you're following through, you won't be able to look to the rear and actually see those marks. Not a huge deal, but sometimes you're cutting stringers, things like that. You want to be able to see that you're kind of still on track and you're not at an angle and not just the leading edge of the blade that's staying on track. Regardless, that's not a huge deal by any means. We have our secondary or our auxiliary handle right here on the front of the motor, of the brushless motor, and then we have our Allen key, our hex key right here, locks on the side of the saw, so we can easily make blade changes and have the tool ready for that. Let's go ahead and throw a blade in there. We have an arbor lock right here, so that's going to lock out that motor to keep it from turning. And since it is a blade right saw, so in other words, when we're holding this saw, blade is to the right, since it is a blade right saw, then it's going to be standard threads where lefty's loosey and righty is tighty. Blade left saws will be the opposite. Blade left saws, you have reverse threading or left-handed threads. No knockout on this blade. We're going to raise this all the way up, and before we use this, we're going to talk about something, specifically these knobs here. Most of you probably know exactly where I'm going with this. Going to loosen these up. This is the new SKIL track guide, or guide rail, or whatever you want to call this, but basically it enables you to make this saw a track saw. So in this kit, you get the 2 rails. So 2 rails here. Then we get a set of clamps and a connector, which is already right there. So that's cool that they included the clamps. And by the way, the clamps will slide into these rails right here. Clamp to a table, clamp to a board, whatever you need to do. So these little Allen screws will screw onto this little plate right here, and now that'll freely slide over. And then I can attach these 2 rails together. And you just want to kind of split the difference here. And now you have, once you tighten those up, you have one 55-inch rail, or you can leave them apart and have 2 different 27.5-inch rails. Now here's one of the cool things about these rails is the fact that you can have one side set for, say, your 90 cuts and the other side set for your 45-degree cuts, because that's going to be a different offset on the actual tongue that sticks out here where you can line up. So you have to true this initially out of the gate. You'll see here, and by the way, that's where our knobs came into play, is this little rail right here. This is going to sit right there on there, and it's going to slide back and forth. Well, obviously, there's a little bit of play there. We want to cut nice and straight. We don't want that play, so you can just tighten these till we get a little bit of friction. We can remove that play that was in that. Give it a little bit more tighten and really take out that play, but of course the harder you tighten, the more friction you're going to have on this, which still is not bad. And again, that's going to ensure that you have nice true cuts. Now you can see here that my blade is quite a ways from the actual guide. However, if I go to my 45, now you'll see that my blade is right in contact with the rail. Flip the saw over. And now you'll see that my blade is in contact with the rail. And we have to true this up. On our first cut is where we actually kind of dial in the whole cutting system. Let's do that. Now what we want to do is this little black tongue here, we want to get that cut nice and true, so then we know our blade rides right against that, and then all we have to do is line up our rail on our marks or on our boards or on our cuts, and then it's going to cut nice and straight, and we don't have to do a lot of measurements. We can just lay it on the marks, make the cut, and we're good to go. So first thing we need to do is make a full length cut down this whole rail. Now initially, when I come off back far enough to get to that cut, that's only really leaving me part of the system attached or in connection with the rail. So I'm going to start with my whole shoe on the rail and make my cut, and then I'm going to back up and cut this last portion here afterwards. So right now I've got my depth adjustment nice and free where I can kind of plunge cut it, and I'll probably come down a little below that 1/2 inch of plywood, and then I'll lock it out. Got my battery in now. We'll start it up and then start our plunge. Lock it down. So you'll see this nice sliver that we've cut off of there, except for this rear part here, and now we've got that nice and trued exactly to that blade. I'm going to try to carefully come back and make that initial first cut. Okay, now we should be able to look down that and ensure that we have a nice straight pass for that rail now. Now what that rail is going to enable me to do is, if I were measuring and say I put a crow's foot here, and now rather than having to take a line or take a ruler and draw it, I can just line up that guide rail right on those marks, set the depth of my saw, and make your cut. Now I will say, I've used quite a few track saws. It doesn't have a lot of grip here on the bottom. These strips here that are acting as the actual guide, they provide a little bit, but like when I was off on half of it, it kind of lost some of the grip. So beware of that, but on a whole piece of wood where both would be able to grab on, it would be absolutely fine. But I did notice that it didn't have as much grip when half of it was hanging off the edge, you see on this small tongue that I was cutting. That's probably not going to be the case most of the time. You'll have a solid piece of wood to actually lay that on, and then it's not going to move. You can see now, as long as both those pieces are on the wood, it holds quite well. It's just when it's just like that. And of course what that also made it do was kind of lean at a kilter and didn't grab near as well. So just a word of caution, make sure that both strips are on the wood. You're going to get a lot better grip that way. And if not, then ensure that you still got a good lock on it. And that's where you could actually utilize the clamps that come with it. So now we've got some 2x6 pressure treated wood up here. I think these were concrete forms at one time, but it will work for what we're after, and that's to cut up some 2x material. So again, pressure treated lumber, and we're going to dive down and set the depth here on our saw. And let's see how well we can cross cut. Obviously that should not be a big deal, right? By the way, easy sight line here on the front of the shoe to actually see where we're cutting. And at a 45, this is where some circ saws will have a little trouble in making that cut. So it's not exactly happy there, but will it make the cut? Sure, it'll do it. And then obviously we want to know, can we rip cut a pressure treated 2x piece of lumber? So we've got the blade set at just below 2 inches. So as we mentioned, it's not exactly happy doing it. Like their 2x20 volt rear handle saw would rip through that with no problem whatsoever. So a little slower on the single 20 volt, but can you do it? Absolutely. If you needed to rip cut a piece of 2x lumber, you could do it. And I pushed it pretty hard. If you lightened up on it a little bit, maybe even throw in a better blade, you probably get a little cleaner and faster cut on it. But still did very well. Has the power to do what you need to do for the price at $169. So that's the thing with this, $169 for the entire kit. That comes with the battery, the charger, and the saw, and still have those features. I don't know that there's something else out there that can handle that, especially when you look at combining the track guide with it. So kind of same case there. Is the track guide the best track guide we've seen? No. I mean, if you're looking for the best, then you're not thinking about spending $200. You're out there looking at, $600 and $800 saws and kits, going with, the nice woodworkers paradise. But if you don't have a track saw yet, if you don't have a guide rail yet, is this a good option? Absolutely. You're looking at $80 to have 2 tracks. And by the way, these short little tracks come in really, really handy because you don't realize how many little short cross cuts you make as well. And if you just got one big long guide rail, that becomes a real pain. So these will come in very handy, obviously putting them together. And by the way, when you put them together, make sure you true them together and know exactly where they made up and everything, because that's going to give you a cleaner cut. But again, going back to value on this, at $80 for the guide rail, great option there. At $169 for the saw, great option there, again, because you're getting the whole kit with the battery, with the charger, and the saw, and a 5-year warranty. Also, as I mentioned, if you haven't checked out new SKIL power tools, you owe yourself, especially on the cordless side, to take a look at them. So, hey, check them out. We'll have a link in the description to this as well as the guide rails. Not sure if this is available yet. Supposed to be, but should be any time now. These should be hitting the shelves on the guide rails. I know this saw is available on Amazon. Again, we'll have a link in the description for it. Keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Have a great day. Keep smiling.